My name is Min Liu, and I'm a member of BLIA St. Louis. Today, it's my great honor to welcome you all to this English public talk of our 2021 BLIA North America Cloud Lecture Series. The title of Venerable Miao Guang's talk today is Self-Mastery, Avalokitesvara's Lessons on Being Wise and Skillful. Venerable Miao Guang is the personal English interpreter of Venerable Master Xingyun and the Deputy Chancellor of the Foguangshan Institute of Humanistic Buddhism. Venerable Miao Guang's other titles include the Director of the Department of International Affairs of the Foguangshan Institute of Humanistic Buddhism. I'd like to share a few words now about Venerable Miao Guang's topic and why I am personally excited to hear more today. In the past years, my life and the life of those around me have been drastically changed due to the pandemic. How we work, how we parent, how we travel, how we engage with others and the world around us all went through significant changes. And with these changes came uncertainty, anxiety, frustration, and at times even anger. How can we cultivate self-awareness amidst such chaos? How are we to remain calm and undeterred in our practice and make peace with adversity and challenges that come our way? I look forward to learning more today. Now, let us join our palms and welcome Venerable Miao Guang.
Auspicious greetings to all the audience of the North America Cloud series. I would like to thank you for the opportunity for me to join you in these very trying years. I believe in the past few months, this series has provided you with a very strong lineup of lecturers and Dharma teachers who not only share with you the knowledge and application of the Dharma to help us get through these very difficult times. There are also very interesting topics about how to protect the environment so that we as humanity will begin to find new ways to coexist with the world. This actually includes a change of mindset. We need to rethink the way we live and no longer put comfort as our top priority. Secondly, it will include a transformation of our way of coexisting with the environment. How do we keep the environment sustainable? How do we look after our own minds? And thirdly, I believe it will be a huge change and a shift of ways in which how we interact and coexist together. So today my topic is self-mastery. Avalokitesvara's lesson on being wise and skillful. The fact is, in these past 2 years, I have received quite some invitation to give Dharma talks on the cloud. Coincidentally, I've actually chosen Avalokitesvara as the main part of my many topics. And so it actually came to the extent that some organizers suggested that I talk about something else. However, I feel that Avalokitesvara has helped me through a lot of challenging and difficult times, not just in the past few years, but also during my teenage days and the days when I was growing up in Taiwan and Australia. And so the topic of self-mastery involves how we can grow spiritually and the types of knowledge and wisdom that we're able to gain. Well, in fact, my learning about Avalokitesvara has drastically changed my way of learning the Dharma. For example, in the first 10 years of my life as a practicing Buddhist, I was in my teenage days, and I believe that as long as I start to learn the Dharma, all my worries will go away. My imperfection will disappear, and life will be just good as ever. That having begun learning and practicing the Dharma, I would be invincible. But I was wrong. Not only did this worry never go away, these worries lingered and they ended up requiring a lot of my attention in how to deal with them. So the challenge was when I learned to focus on these problems and worries, what do I do with it? So in those first 10 years, I believe that all I needed to do was to focus on some kind of application to make them go away. But they didn't. In the first 5 years of my life in Australia, I came to realize that Australia is a country of sports where tennis, as well as cricket and perhaps rugby, prevailed over most of the sports to me initially. And so as a way to fit in and to follow the local culture, I began to play tennis. But for those who have played tennis, you will understand that for beginners who first pick up their racket to hit the ball, it actually takes up a lot of strength because the racket could be quite heavy. And when the balls come flying at you at a very high speed, it can also be very heavy. So you have to put in a lot of effort to learn your forehands and backhands. Every time I missed the shot, I would get really worked up and I would get really upset with myself, asking, why aren't you getting better? Why aren't you improving? And so that was the days when I wondered what the learning and application of Dharma would help me in terms of my performances in sports as well as in school. But you know, teenage days, the youthful days are filled with worries and troubles, not only concerning relationships, our work at school, as well as what we're pursuing. And so that was pretty much how I spent my days in school. And then well into the second and third decade of my life as a practicing Buddhist, I came to realize that life was filled with just as many imperfections as ever, even more so as age comes. But the only difference is that I've learned to accept these worries and imperfections with greater ease than my teenage days. That's when I begin to experience the growth of my own 自在 or self-mastery. Although they were nowhere near perfection, but they have really begun to make a change in my life. Until one day, when I came across the Heart Sutra, instead of just chanting it during the morning and evening services at the temple, I began to try to read it very carefully. And by doing so, I realized that all along, the learning and application of Dharma is never about eliminating the troubles of life. It's never a deduction. Right? Life is more pluses than minuses in one way or the other because age continues to increase and your experiences continue to increase. And so it's no longer about the focus on eliminating these negative parts or what we dislike about ourselves. Instead, it's really about how to make peace with them, to make peace with our imperfections and the downsides of life that tends to make us feel unhappy. And so self-mastery through the messages of Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, which I will discuss later in today's talk, began to send a message to me, helping me realize that when we pursued happiness in life, we need to realize that being happy doesn't mean that we try to make everything in life perfect. It means you have decided to look beyond the imperfections and then to make peace with them. So Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva does it so well, especially with his positioning in the Heart Sutra, where he begins with a very leisurely and elegant decline in the process of answering Sariputra's question about how to attain the perfection of wisdom. It really was about his journey to enlightenment in the Heart Sutra, where he says, when Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva was coursing through the Prajnaparamita very deeply, he realized that the 5 skandhas were empty, and thus he overcame all ills and suffering. So we begin with this initial message about the attainment of the perfection of wisdom, and also as a way to attain the so-called Ishvara or self-mastery. Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva demonstrates the perfection of wisdom, especially through the style of Ishvara or self-mastery, in 2 very crucial ways in the Buddhist sutras. The first is the beginning of the Heart Sutra, where when Sariputra asks Avalokitesvara the question of how one should practice in order to attain the perfection of wisdom, we see Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva reclining in a very leisurely and elegant position as he thinks back to his journey of enlightenment. So this is the famous quote of when Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva was coursing in the Prajnaparamita deeply. He realized that the 5 skandhas were empty. Thus, he overcame all ills and suffering. Not only has Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva attained such a liberation for himself, he also uses this ability to help all living beings do the same. So other than the Heart Sutra, in the Universal Gate chapter of the Lotus Sutra, we see this answer from the Buddha, where the Buddha tells everybody, good men, if there be countless hundreds of millions of billions of living beings experiencing all manner of suffering, who hear of Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva and call his name with single-minded effort, then Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva will instantly observe the sound of their cries, and they will all be liberated. We are looking at somebody who offers unconditional support and help to liberate us from all of our worries as well as trouble. So in one way or the other, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva demonstrates Ishvara or self-mastery through being a giver of fearlessness, which is what we need mostly at this moment. We no longer see Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva as a savior who instantly performs a miracle to free us from suffering. Instead, we will see that through the empowerment of Avalokitesvara, we gain more faith. We attain greater understanding of the Dharma, and we have more courage to put it into actual practice, so that under the guidance of the Ishvara, we learn to get back on our feet again whenever we fall. In other words, what lesson we want to learn from Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva is to be the master of our own lives. Not to let our fears, doubt, pride, or attachment take control of us, but to remain focused and aware in the face of adversities. And even more, to turn these adversities and challenges into our own strength. To me, this is Ishvara, or self-mastery, as demonstrated by Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. So who is Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva? I believe this figure in Buddhism needs no further introduction. But allow me to still go through some of the points so that we establish a common understanding as we developed the process of acquiring self-mastery through his demonstration. First of all, the name Avalokitesvara. Ava means from up high. Lokita, this world, and Ishvara means Lord or sovereign. So together, Avalokitesvara means the Lord or the Master who looks upon the world from up high and guards all living beings with skillful means. In this case, we see the word up high. Rather than looking at a being who is in a heavenly place above us, we would say ava, or up high, means a master who has attained a sublime state of attainment and self-mastery, like a master chef who watches a group of junior chefs improve their culinary skills. And as he observes, he immediately knows what's missing and what can be done more correctly so that these chefs can improve faster. And so in the same way, when Avalokitesvara as the master observes us living beings through the ups and downs of our lives, he will guard us and offer us guidance and dharma so that we learn how to navigate ourselves through the ocean of suffering. So this is Avalokitesvara. And where did Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva come from? It has been said in the sutra that in his previous lives, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva was already the righteous illuminator of the righteous Dharma Tathagata, or in Chinese, 正法明如来. This is somebody who had already attained Buddhahood, who has already navigated across the sea of suffering, reaches the other shore, but decides to turn his ship about so that he could help even more living beings cross the sea. 正法明如来. And secondly, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva is also known as the successor of Amitabha Buddha. If you have seen the image of the Amitabha triad, you will see Amitabha Buddha in the center and then flanked by two bodhisattvas, one of them being Avalokitesvara. In other words, Avalokitesvara at one stage is regarded as a student of Amitabha Buddha. Thirdly, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva is known as the Bodhisattva who, just as said before, listens to cries for help in this world and reaches out to liberate those cries of suffering with skillful means. And this is vividly depicted in the Lotus Sutras, Universal Gateway chapter, where Guan Yin or Guan Shi Yin is known to be the savior of many people who are suffering. And fourthly, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, known as the figure who answers the question in the opening of the Heart Sutra, is one who has attained Prajna Paramita and demonstrates self-mastery or perfect ease, as well as absolute comfort in explaining his journey of attaining enlightenment. So Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva can be known in many ways. But what makes Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva so special can be known in the quote where it says, "There is Amitabha Buddha in every home. There is Avalokitesvara in every household." And this is exactly how I grew up with Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. On my lunar birthday every year, my mother would take me to a small Guanyin temple just outside of Taipei. I vividly remember the standing statue of Guanyin over a pond, where the pond would frequently be filled up with animals that would be released. We understand that among traditional Buddhist practices, to release lives is a way to accumulate our merits. My mother would take me to the temple, so I would receive some kind of blessing from Avalokitesvara. I believe this is one of her wishes, so that we would grow up healthy and safe. But as I continued to grow as well, I established another relationship with Avalokitesvara. That is, not only to receive blessings from him, but hopefully one day, through his exemplary practices of cultivation and compassion, maybe one day I too can become a Guanyin who is able to reach out to living beings and to help people. Another reason why Avalokitesvara is special is because the first Buddhist statue that appeared in my house was actually also a wooden statue of Guan Yin, a woman figure, a motherly figure who radiated a sense of warmth and calmness that gave me a sense of comfort every day. I was 10 years old. And so ever since that day, this wooden Guan Yin statue appeared in my home. My mother gave me a very special task. That is, every morning and evening, I would be responsible for offering incense and water. I was also being told by my mom to make sure that I laid 3 prostrations every day before I left the house for school. And in doing this, I would always observe her facial expression. Although it is a wooden statue, but believe it or not, her expressions changed every day. On certain days, she would look rather stern. And on certain days, she would look very gentle and kind. It was like she was telling me to be careful when I leave my house for school, or that she would warn me not to be naughty and do my duty as a student, as a daughter, every day. And so these kind of daily conversations became quite important to me because every day I would look forward to the messages Guan Yin would have for me so that I become more aware and careful, or that I would be ready to welcome a happy day. So no matter what that message was, every day it was like the Guan Yin was telling me, it's okay, I'm here for you. I will help you get through the day. So the statue stayed with me in my first home in Taiwan, in my second home in Taiwan, and even in my first home in Australia, and in the latest home that my mother and my father owned in North Sydney. The wooden Guan Yin statue still accompanies them through the quieter days of COVID. A third reason to why Avalokitesvara is so special to me happened when I was about 14, when we had just moved into our second home in Sydney. It was a brand new house constructed from nothing. We had only moved into that house for about 2 weeks. And it was on a particular afternoon where I came home from tennis after school and nobody was home. So I waited and waited and waited. Way into dinner, still nobody came home. And the sky began to get dark. And as a new house, none of the curtains in the house had been installed. And my house was situated on the corner of 2 streets, which meant that when the sky got dark, I was sitting inside the house, feeling that anybody who passed by the house could look through into the house and see that I was home alone. As this thought came to me, I began to feel very frightened and scared. So I turned off all the lights and I tried to hide in my own room. Even by doing so, I still felt like the whole world was peeking through the house, looking at me, watching me being home alone, that anybody could just break through the window and take me away. So as fear consumed me, I began to feel very helpless and frightened until the moment suddenly the image of Avalokitesvara downstairs flashed by my mind. It was a very warm smile, a calming pair of eyes looking at me, telling me, hey, it's okay. And at that moment, in an instant, my fears went away. I felt okay. I felt safe at home. I'd come to realize that if my windows and my doors were locked, nobody would come through and hurt me. And so in a split of a second, the fear turned into a sense of comfort. And I just got out of my room, went back to my living room, turned on the lights, turned on the TV, and I started to enjoy the evening programs. And very soon, my family came home with dinner, and everything was fine. So it was that very special moment that gave me an immediate experience of what it's like to be relieved from fears, especially when I was able to visualize Avalokitesvara's comforting and soothing expression. And whenever I chanted his name, everything would be okay. So again, the giving of fearlessness to me wasn't so much a miracle, but to me, it was an immediate moment of relief from my fears and my imaginations of the world really coming to hurt me. And so that's why I want to talk about Avalokitesvara's lesson, a lesson not of miracle, but a lesson of empowerment and of the application of Dharma, and especially this unconditional acceptance of the world that allows us to be a peaceful part of it. Once you embrace and accept this world, nothing can hurt you. Next, I would like to talk about the 3 ways by which Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva demonstrates the Ishvara, or the sense of self-mastery. First of all, Avalokitesvara demonstrates his self-mastery through a sense of elegant fearlessness. Okay. What do I mean by this? You can imagine this elegant fearlessness, first of all, by his repose in the beginning of the Heart Sutra. In the beginning of the Heart Sutra, Sariputra, inspired by the Buddha in deep meditative samadhi, turns to Avalokitesvara and asks the question, how does a good son and a good daughter practice to attain the perfection of wisdom? So this is the moment we will see the images of Avalokitesvara reclining on either a rock, looking back to his journey of enlightenment with a lot of comfort. Okay. You would see that reclining repose in a very easy and relaxed way. It's like the Bodhisattva is enjoying this journey once again. Right? Very comfortably lying against the back of his seat and with his right hand resting on his folded knee. Very comfortable, very relaxed. This is a very special Buddhist etiquette. For most of us who begin to learn the Dharma, our first lesson is usually to learn the Buddhist etiquette. And why do we do that? Because in the 4 etiquettes, we learn to walk like the wind, sit firmly like a gong so that you remain unmoved, stand tall and straight like a pine tree, and recline like an archer's bow. This is also demonstrated by Buddhist masters who present themselves with such majestic demeanor. And when they do that, as you observe masters with such wonderful presentation of demeanor, you realize they all have an awe-inspiring quality that calms you down. They will inspire your respect, and suddenly you just want to hear them teach the Dharma. You become very eager to hear what the head abbot of Wangshan has to say whenever you see him walk onto the seat, turns around, does a very fun and elegant bow, addresses everybody with his affirming eyes and smile, and then you just want to listen to more. Monastics train ourselves to do this every day, in the everyday actions of our daily routine, in our walking, in our sitting and reclining, to the extent that one day, whatever it is that you do, you always present a sense of calmness and composure. So in this way, your demeanor absorbs everybody. You have everybody's attention in a very respectful and attentive way, and then you're ready to teach the Dharma. So without saying anything, Avalokitesvara demonstrates this. I want to share this opportunity to share one of my most favorite Guanyin statues in the world. This is the water and moon Guanyin, collected by the Nelson Atkinson's Museum of Art in Kansas. You see a Liao Dynasty Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva wooden statue, sitting in the pose of royal ease, or the Maharaja Lila, on a rock with his right arm resting on his folded right knee. Then the left arm rests on the rock while the left leg hangs leisurely down over the rockery onto a lotus blossom. The position of this Guanyin conveys the impression that the Bodhisattva might at any moment awake from deep contemplation and step down. You have to be very comfortable with yourself and your surroundings in order to look that elegant and at ease. In other words, the anchor of your presence not only steadies your own mind and body, but also that of others. The second way by which Avalokitesvara demonstrates his Ishvara is through the practice of single-mindedness. In Chinese, 一心称名. In the Universal Gate chapter, you read where it says, when people hear of Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva and call his name with single-minded effort, then Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva will instantly observe the sound of their cries, and they will all be liberated. You practice single-minded focus by calling out his name with single-minded effort. And I would have to say, this is a very generous condition offered by Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. It's like he's saying, my gateway is open. As long as you have the faith and confidence to walk through this gate to seek liberation. Right? If you believe strong enough that by calling out my name, I will come to you, then I will come to you. So the faith is demonstrated by the simple act of calling out somebody's name. And so the owner of this name, without compassion, would be very difficult to be this generous and impartial. Right? Imagine your children all calling out to you for help at once. Imagine all your students all calling out to you for help at once. Imagine the whole city calling out to you for help at once. Are we able to reach out to them with that sense of composure and self-mastery? Avalokitesvara does it. So in other words, when this generous offering made by Avalokitesvara to open up the universal gateway with such compassion, Avalokitesvara shows that no matter where you are, no matter what sound you make, as long as this sound is meant to be sent out to me, then I'm ready. Even more, I will be able to help you in a way that is most suited to you. So that is why Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva has 33 manifestations appearing in all nations, in all kinds of ways, so that living beings will find liberation through his guidance. So in this way, we can also understand why Avalokitesvara is so popular among all nations and all races, because he has a very intimate relationship with the Saha world. The Saha world of endurance, the Saha world of suffering, where all living beings are seeking a sense of comfort and solace as well as reliance. So with this single-minded effort in calling out Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, you establish a sense of faith and confidence in both yourself and others to receive help. Now there's a second way to single-minded effort. Before we've just said that you call out to Avalokitesvara. But what happens if you don't call out his name? What happens if you feel more intimate with a different name? If you called out to a different name, would Avalokitesvara still come to help you? The answer is yes, because one way or the other, you are still practicing single-minded effort. Say, for example, starting in the Eastern Jin dynasty, the practice of Pure Land became very popular among the common people. Why? For a couple of reasons. They have said that the practice of Pure Land Buddhism is cheap and convenient. What does this mean? It meant that the common people who cannot afford to learn to read or write, like the artisans, they don't have to pay for pen and paper. They don't have to go to school in order to learn to read the sutra. All they need to do is simply chant Amitabha Buddha's name. To the extent that when you're so focused and subsumed into the blessings of Amitabha Buddha, you will find liberation. So if you chanted Amitabha Buddha's name, can you still get help from Guanyin? Okay. The answer is yes. Because as said before, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva is known as the successor of Amitabha Buddha. So in the images of the Amitabha Buddha triad, you will see Amitabha in the center, and Avalokitesvara on the right, and Dashizi Pusa on the other side. These are the two bodhisattvas who support Amitabha in his effort to reach out to living beings and to bring them to his Western Pure Land. And of course, by chanting Amitabha Buddha's name, it makes no difference to Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, because Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are no different from one another. In fact, they're one, as their lights all each shine on one another and make this world even brighter. It is only the sentient beings who have a sense of discrimination who would make a difference between who Amitabha Buddha is and who Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva is. But to them, when one light is placed next to the other, the world only becomes even betterly illuminated. They do not obstruct one another. And so with the metaphor of the light never obstructing one another and only making the world even better illuminated, Avalokitesvara demonstrates a sense of equality through the perfection of wisdom. As we have said, the perfection of wisdom helps us transcend all concepts and dualities. So when there is nothing but unity in the minds of the Bodhisattva, there is no you and me. It's like me asking you to draw a line in empty space. Can you separate anything? No, because you will not be able to separate something out of nothing. So in the same way, if you chant any Buddha's name single-mindedly, Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva will still connect with your effort and reach out to you. With that impartial and unconditional effort, this is his way of demonstrating Ishvara. Next, I want to talk about the third condition regarding single-minded effort. What if you didn't even chant out anybody's name? What if you chose not to call out to somebody's name? Would Avalokitesvara still come to help you? Of course, there are many different ways to cultivate or to practice Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva's way. For example, instead of chanting Guanyin Pusa or Avalokitesvara, you can choose to recite the Universal Gate chapter about his amazing story of liberation. You could even choose to recite the Great Compassion Dharani, Dabei once, twice, 7 times, 18 times, or 21 times. You could even choose to participate in the Great Compassion Repentance. In any of these ways, you are still establishing a single-minded effort in connecting with Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. In other words, there's no need to discriminate between the different ways to connect with him, as long as you're focused. So when you just chant the Heart Sutra, right, as you talk about Avalokitesvara, it's the same as calling out to Guanyin. And when you recite the Great Compassion Dharani, you are repeating all the different synonyms the different names of Avalokitesvara throughout the Dharani. Or when you recite the Universal Gate chapter, right, it talks about the various meritorious deeds of Avalokitesvara. It's a praise of his compassion and equality to reach out unconditionally to any being. Or in the process of attending the great compassion repentance, you are going through the journey of how Avalokitesvara demonstrates limitless, boundless power to reach out to all living beings. And it, in fact, is a very touching story. And it's an overwhelming experience for you to read about Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva's vows by saying that when you fall into a pit of fire, if you chant Avalokitesvara's name, he will put out the fire. When you're being washed away by a flood, if you chant Avalokitesvara's name, you will be delivered to a dry and safe place. And when you're confronted by bandits and even rakshas with anger and hatred, Avalokitesvara will extinguish their anger and bring you to a place of coolness. So again and again, we become continuously inspired by his amazing vow to help all beings under all kinds of circumstances. So in other words, this practice of single-minded effort asks us not to choose as long as you are sincere, as long as you're focused. I remember 2 years ago when I was in Europe, I had some time to spend with one of the venerables who had spent 20 years in Germany. And so when I turned to her and asked her, right, you go through all these challenges and difficulties in the process of propagating the Dharma. So what practice do you follow to help you overcome all of this? And Venerable Miao Guang was a very interesting, very funny, but very inspiring speaker. She says, for someone of a simple mind like me, for someone as mediocre and ordinary like me, I don't go through anything complicated. I just recite the Great Compassion Dharani. And it has helped me through a lot of the challenges that I've been through in Germany. And so for me, it answered all the questions about single-minded effort. Not to choose, but just focus on one thing. Last but not least about single-minded effort, I want to say, what other benefits can the single-minded chanting of Avalokitesvara's name bring? And if you have read the Universal Gate chapter, right, the answer is pretty obvious. It helps us overcome our greed, our anger, as well as our ignorance. In the Universal Gate chapter, Buddha tells the Arhats and the Bodhisattvas, good men, if there be countless hundreds of millions or billions of living beings experiencing all manner of suffering, who hear of Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva and call his name with single-minded effort, then Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva will instantly observe the sound of their cries, and they will all be liberated. I would like to use this opportunity to clarify the message of instant liberation. I just want to say that it probably won't be an instant miracle. If you chant Avalokitesvara's name for a miracle, you will most likely be disappointed because that's not the purpose. In fact, the real purpose of this single-minded effort of chanting Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva's name is for the purpose of empowerment. By chanting the name, we become inspired by Avalokitesvara to find the strength to overcome our ills and suffering. We're not asking Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva to get rid of this for us. So this is thus an empowerment of transformation. A transformation of our character and our behavior inspired by a role model. And by role model, we mean someone who is worthy of your respect, someone whom you look up to, someone who you yourself want to become or emulate. Avalokitesvara as a role model serves a reminder of how to stay close to our Buddha nature. So when we are being consumed by our greed, when we want money, when we want fame, when we want all the benefits, when we want love, to follow the practice in the Universal Gate chapter, it tells us that by chanting Avalokitesvara's name, we don't instantly get rid of the greed. Instead, as we chant his name, we become inspired by his unconditional loving kindness and universal compassion. And as we're reminded of how much effort he goes through to reach out to the countless sentient beings, naturally, we will be inspired to ask us, while Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva is out there doing all of this, why are we being so greedy for our own good? And that way, your mind and body begins to change. So for this reason, water in the Universal Gate chapter is used as a metaphor for greed, that when we are being drowned in our own greed for love, for benefit, for wealth, and all of a sudden, as we are inspired by Avalokitesvara's vow to perhaps divert or focus more of our effort and our blessings to helping other beings, then naturally we will begin to lessen that sense of greed. Secondly, when we are being consumed in the fire of hatred, when things don't go our way, when we are unhappy with the world, right? A simple moment of reminder of Avalokitesvara's vow to only wish for other beings' well-being instead of that of our own, then maybe in one way or the other, the fire of anger or hatred will start to extinguish. And so for this reason, fire in the Universal Gate chapter is used as a metaphor for anger that burns away all of the merits, right? When you're very angry, your body temperature rises, right? Blood rushes to your head, your face turns red, like a fire that consumes all of our reasoning and rationality. But at the same time, when you chant Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva's name, right, you're reminded of the calm and coolness which Avalokitesvara wishes to bring to all living beings. And naturally, the calamity of fire will be put out by the empowerment of Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva in us. Thirdly, when we are drowning in our own ignorance, and by ignorance, it means we deny the rule or the law of cause and effect. When we lose our senses and fall into delusive thoughts. But by chanting Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva's name, it's like a ray of light is being shined upon the dark sea. So for this reason, wind is used as a metaphor in the Universal Gate chapter for ignorance. So when we are being washed away by our ignorance, in the wild waves of all of the irrationalities that blurs our minds, that dulls our minds from proper judgment, then we see that ship of salvation provided by Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva to help us navigate ourselves out of the wind of ignorance and eventually find a shore that we can land for safety, which is liberation. And so for these simple reasons, the benefits of chanting Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva's name with single-minded effort is the same as the diligent cultivation of precept, meditation, and wisdom that will help put out the three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance. Therefore, through the empowerment of Avalokitesvara, We learn to turn greed into compassion. We learn to turn hatred or anger into courage. We learn to turn ignorance into wisdom. But all of this, be it compassion, be it courage, or be it wisdom, it would all be directed towards the liberation and the benefit for all living beings. This is known by the great empowerment of chanting Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva's name. Now, the third way by which Avalokitesvara demonstrates Ishvara is through unconditional loving-kindness and universal compassion. In the sutra, it tells us that Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva manifests in whatever form that a person needed in order to be liberated, and he will teach the Dharma to the person in that manifestation. In this way, it's telling us that Avalokitesvara knows exactly what it's like to be you. Of all kinds of family, of friends, and support that we seek in life, the greatest treasure is to be able to find somebody who knows what we're going through. And Avalokitesvara does so through his endless manifestations to tell you that, yes, I know what it's like to be you, and I will walk through this calamity with you. Sir William Osler, one of the four founders of the Johns Hopkins Hospital, once said, "The good physician treats the disease. The great physician treats the patient who has the disease." This means that the great physician understands the patient and the content of that patient's illness. And this is exactly how Avalokitesvara treats the illnesses of all living beings. And what Sir William Osler said continues to inspire doctors who find ways to treat patients better and more efficiently by understanding their stories. So there's an American doctor who also once said that to be a great physician, you must understand the whole story. Each patient represents a story. That story includes their diseases, their new problem, their social situation, and their beliefs. In other words, one can never help others without empathy. If you focus only on how you wish to treat the illness, it's not upaya. For upaya means using the right method for the right person under the right conditions. And Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva applies upaya by manifesting as a man for a man who is seeking help, as a woman for a woman who is seeking help, and so on. For those who have read Venerable Master Xing Yun's photobiography called Cloud and Water, you may be aware of the story about the pigeon. This is in a deserted garden, inside which stands an uncared-for statue of Avalokitesvara. Though well adorned with jewelries, you will see the lights no longer shine because of the long-term lack of care. The garden is covered in old leaves and dried branches. And it was a very windy day when a pigeon comes to seek shelter at the foot of the Guanyin statue. Then the Guanyin statue gives the pigeon a task. It tells the pigeon that there are still a lot of poor people out there who could still make use of the jewelry on the statue. So it asks the pigeon to bring out one pearl or jewel after the other, to bring it to the poor people. So this pigeon, although already weary and hungry from the long journeys, tries its best to fly one pearl or one diamond out to a poor family at a time, until come the last moment when it finally finished its task. It dies at the foot of Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva's statue because of fatigue. And upon that moment, the statue appeared dull and dark because of the absence of the pearls and the jewels. And at that moment, the owner of the garden comes in to see the unsplendor of the old statue and the dead pigeon. He took one look at the pigeon, without a second thought, picked it up, threw it into the bin, and then passed by the statue of Guanyin without even a second look. And that's the end of the story. For you who listen to this story, at this moment, if any thoughts of unfairness or displeasure enters our mind whenever we hear how disrespectfully the statue and how rudely the pigeon were being treated, then perhaps our mind is not at one with Ishvara. Because Ishvara, demonstrated by Avalokitesvara, enables us to see things simply as they are, and to realize that there is no need to project our emotions or expectations onto it, because everything is just as it's meant to be. There's no need to discriminate, no need to have any expectations at the happenings of this world. Because even if you do, you cannot stop everything from happening. So the perfect ease and the great acceptance of the world's happenings is Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva's Ishvara. It's unconditional, it's universal, as long as the purpose of our existence has been fulfilled by offering our services and help to other people. Now, the fourth way to demonstrate Avalokitesvara's Ishvara is a reminder for us not to only seek blessing or miracles in Avalokitesvara, but to see the inspiration and become Avalokitesvara Bodhisattvas ourselves. We always see statues of Guanyin or Avalokitesvara holding a rosary bead or a chanting bead. And when asked, when we chant his name. But if Avalokitesvara is seen holding chanting beads, whose name does he chant? The answer is he's actually chanting his own name. Why? Because better to seek salvation within ourselves than that from others. So the final message of Ishvara, after the presentation of elegant fearlessness, after the ability to single-mindedly focus on our practice of compassion and equality, and after a demonstration of unconditional loving kindness and universal compassion, the next thing is to really be in the shoes of Avalokitesvara, just as he has been in our shoes. We exchange positions. We put ourselves in each other's positions and see what we can do now that we have grown better and spiritually. So to be Avalokitesvaras ourselves, we ask ourselves the question, are you aware of your own thoughts at any moment? Are you comfortable with these thoughts? Usually we become uncomfortable when we are angry, when we are jealous, when we are timid, when we are unafraid. Avalokitesvara sees the same experience with us in a way that he too sees the fear, the anger, the uncertainty, and the jealousy. The only difference is that he does not hold on to it. The only difference is that he has enough awareness to transform all of this into a sense of compassion, so that it becomes a strength that is projected onto other living beings. And thirdly, you can ask yourself a question. Are you calm and unmoved in your surrounding? When your environment is too noisy, when it's too cold, when it's unexpected, can you still remain calm and composed? Fourthly, are you at peace with even undesirable conditions? When people don't treat you well, when you fall into a condition that makes you uncomfortable. Once Venerable Master Xing was in Japan. He was being received by the group of Japanese monastics who treated them to a very sumptuous meal. But in the meal, it included fish stock in the soup. Because to the Japanese, there's no difference between vegetarian food and fish stock. And so, as many of the monastics from Taiwan frowned upon the smell, Venerable Master gulped it down with much gratitude and pleasure, finished the bowl of noodles, and thanked the Japanese monastics for their wonderful cooking. When the other monastics asked him, "Aren't you uncomfortable with the taste of the fish stock?" He turned to them and said, "What fish stock? I taste nothing but their hospitality." I believe this is the type of Ishvara that has helped Venerable Master overcome our own expectations and discrimination, and only focus on the kind intentions and gestures of your host. And this indeed would solve a lot of awkwardness between the different expectations of food and vegetarianism. So in conclusion, today I just wanted to go through the experiences of Ishvara, which Avalokitesvara has demonstrated to us in our everyday life experiences and through the sutras. Many of us learned the skill to observe with awareness, yet we still lack the self-mastery that enables us to make peace with such conditions. But Avalokitesvara does it so well in the face of all sorts of calamities, in the fires of anger, in the flood of greed, in the storm of ignorance, not only to show that he can overcome it, but also to let us know that if he can do it, he too will be here with us to help us overcome such adversities. So what is self-mastery? An awareness with clarity, the ability to remain calm and composed in the face of adversity, but even greater, the ability to make peace with adversity or the conditions that make us uncomfortable. So there are all kinds of challenges in our lives. And every day is a lesson for us to come closer to that kind of self-mastery. So I hope in today's talk, it brings us closer to Avalokitesvara in his very difficult practices. But it gives us a greater sense of intimacy to his sense of compassion and equality, so that we too can find the courage to become someone like Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva, who demonstrates self-mastery. So I want to end here and hope it inspires us to think greater, think more compassionately, and think with greater wisdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Venerable Miao Guang, for today's talk on self-mastery, with the many practical lessons and relatable stories that we can apply to our daily life and practice. To those of you who stayed with us for the past hour, thank you. Before we close today's talk, there are a few events we would like to call your attention to. Our next BLIA North America Cloud Lecture Series will be on October 16. During this My Faith, My Life Forum, our speakers, Dr. Kwang Chan, BLIA Lay Dharma Lecturer, Michael Liu, BLIA Chonghua Director, Roxana Pang, BLIA Sumati Lecturer, will discuss how they integrate the Dharma practice into their personal and professional lives. This event is hosted by Jenny Chen, BLIA World Headquarters Youth Development Committee Director. On August 29th, there's a lecture in Chinese, 藏经如何写在佛光人的脸上, given by Venerable Hui Chuan, who is the Executive Deputy Abbot and Executive Council President of the Foguangshan Monastery. We welcome our bilingual audience members to join that one. Thank you again for joining this BLIA North America Cloud Lecture Series. Till next time, please take care. Amitofo.